A single name is enough to turn her future into a nightmare. A name she cannot refuse. A name that could destroy her life. Jubelian stares at the list with trembling hands, realizing the truth too late. Her father has already chosen a path for her, and at the end of it stands the most dangerous man in the empire. A prince feared for his cruelty. If she does nothing, she will be trapped, forced into a fate worse than death. But the real problem is not just the prince. It's the fact that she's already entangled with him, without even knowing it. And just as everything begins to spiral out of control, she remembers the moment it all started to change. The girl tearfully assures her father that she didn't do it. But the man won't listen, and she's in shock, not understanding what happened. Earlier, a scream rang out. The princess had fallen, and the lady's drink was allegedly poisoned. A blonde-haired guy accuses Jubelian, asking if she was the one who harmed the princess. The girl denies it and asks Mikhail to believe her. She says she gave her the glass because the princess wanted a drink, but the guy cuts her off. He asks if this happened because of their breakup and his feelings for the princess. The girl is in shock, and the aristocrats whisper about the duke's daughter's jealousy. Everyone believes that she tormented the women who got close to Mikhail. Even the empress suffered, for the heroine hated the princess because of Mikhail. But she swears she didn't want the princess dead, and her father approaches her. The emperor orders her to be thrown into the dungeon immediately. The girl asks her father if he believes her, but he pushes her away. The duke asks to take her away himself, but the emperor hesitates. Then the duke suggests locking her in the shadow room. It is a place without magic or weapons, from which there is no escape, meant for traitors. The girl realizes her father has abandoned her, and she cannot believe it. Standing at the door of the room, she thinks she has truly been abandoned. She remembers that her father had always been cold toward her since childhood. Whenever she came over, he would just ask her why she was there. He forbade her from coming without a reason. Even the gifts weren't from him. As she got older, she realized he wouldn't come to her debut. Now she realizes he never loved her, and he's giving her something. He tells her to make a choice, and she sees a dagger in her hands. She thinks her father wants her to kill herself. The girl begs him not to abandon her, but he leaves. She hears a noise and thinks it's the crown prince. Only the royal family is allowed to enter the shadow room. The prince comes to interrogate the criminal, despite the ban. He threatens the guard with a sword, hinting at torture to uncover the truth. But he says he won't kill her. Upon entering, he asks if she is to blame, and the girl is frightened. She decides it's better to die than to endure torture. The prince shouts for her to stop, but she considers herself a disgrace to her family. Everyone has turned away from her, and, longing for love, she ends her life. Now the heroine is reading this and wants to know the ending. A man approaches her, asking why she called him. She notices that he is 3 hours late. The guy doesn't apologize and thinks she wants to scold him. As a reader, she realizes that tragedy awaits her. And she says it straight out, she wants to break up. Mikhail is surprised and thinks it's absurd. He is Marquis Mikhail Albert of Hesse and the main character. His reaction is logical, since she used to be an ordinary girl. Until she died in an accident and was reborn as the villainous Jubelian. The memories came back recently, after 2 years of being together. She realizes that she behaved just like in a novel, cruelly. She humiliated others and harassed the girls around Mikhail. He was the only one who paid her any attention, and she became obsessed with him because of her lack of love. But now she wants to let him go. To survive, she needs to stay away from him. She firmly declares that it's over. He agrees, but forbids her from showing up in front of him. She smiles, wondering if she has escaped death. She apologizes and wishes him happiness, but he thinks it's a game. But he doesn't understand why he's angry, while she feels relieved. She goes to rest but runs into her father. This is Duke Regis Audrey Floen, her father and the strongest swordsman. But he doesn't love her and simply walks past. She greets him and recalls the truth from the novel. She decides not to seek his love, but to live peacefully at his expense. She says he's tired, but he remains silent. She is scared, and she suggests they both rest. She leaves, but he says there was no practice. He notices that she came early. She used to come home late, because of Mikhail. She wonders whether to tell the truth and decides to come clean. Her father asks why they broke up. She says that Mikhail doesn't love her. The Duke looks at her coldly, and she is frightened. She thinks he was counting on the marriage for the sake of power. But she wants to marry someone who loves her. He leaves in silence, unwilling to speak. She realizes that he doesn't love her, and doesn't believe her. She decides to live quietly and not get in his way. The maid walks down the hallway, worried about her mistress. After the breakup, she might ruin everything. She prays that everything will be all right and announces that the bath is ready. But when she enters, she sees her mistress in tears. She calls out to her, and the heroine thinks she's been found out. The girl pretends she was just yawning and apologizes. She says she's tired and will take a bath tomorrow. She wonders if it's too cold, but repeats that she's tired. The maid bows and lets her rest. Jubelian thanks her, and the maid, almost in tears, leaves. Left alone, she decides not to torment the servants anymore. Marilyn thinks that the lady is suffering from a broken heart. The Duke hears this and asks if his daughter is crying. He demands to know everything, and in the morning she wakes up in a good mood. She feels that the day will be a good one. Marilyn informs her that the Duke is waiting for her at breakfast. At the table, she's surprised, since they usually eat separately. Her father looks at her, and she feels uneasy. He tells her to eat, but she doesn't understand his intentions. He recalls the maid's words about the breakup. He thinks it has hurt her deeply, and she senses his disappointment. After all, he is a war hero and a defender of the crown. And she is a daughter despised by society. The lady has absolutely no social skills, and, to be honest, no friends either. But at the table, she behaves impeccably, as if that were the only thing in which she has no equal. At that moment, the man turns to Jubelian and unexpectedly asks what her ideal man looks like. The girl is so surprised that she drops her knife and immediately asks why her father suddenly decided to bring up this topic. The man calmly replies that he was simply curious. The heroine notes to herself that he had never shown any interest in her before. The lady begins to wonder if he's planning to introduce her to someone and find himself a son-in-law who will become his heir. A moment later, she is almost certain that this is exactly where things are headed, and she asks if he is really asking about her ideal man. If that's the case, her answer is simple. A man must be stronger than her father. Jubelian realizes that no such man exists, which means she will most likely never get married. The Duke looks at her intently and asks if she is telling the truth. And the heroine wonders if he has noticed her trickery. The girl replies that, of course, it would be wonderful, but such a man simply cannot be found anywhere in the world, and isn't that obvious? After all, her father is the pride of the entire nation. Jubelian decides it's better to mention someone of his caliber, because even such a man is nearly impossible to find. Then she adds that she won't marry a man without money, honor, family, good looks, or decent skills. The man looks at her silently, while the heroine merely smiles. A moment later, the Duke calmly says that he understands her. Jubelian, watching his face, wonders if he believes her. When the Duke speaks to her again, she decides to answer any questions he might have. Suddenly, the man suggests they take a walk. The heroine even jumps up from her chair in surprise and asks why. The Duke replies that it's just for the sake of it. But Jubelian realizes that in all her 18 years, he has never once taken her for a walk, and now she has absolutely no idea what his intentions are. A short while later, they are already walking down Agate Street. One of the merchants calls out loudly, assuring them that his clothes are of excellent quality and worth a look. The main character follows the Duke, trying to figure out what he has in mind. A little later, the man starts pointing at strange items and declares that he's taking everything. Jubelian genuinely doesn't understand his behavior, and then he even picks up an expensive rabbit. She thinks it's too expensive and wonders who would even buy it at that price, but the Duke immediately points to it and says he's taking that one too. The girl starts to wonder why he's buying up everything she even looks at. After all, she really just wanted to relax at home. Just then, a girl with a sword walks by, and the main character immediately notices her. The Duke asks Jubelian to wait a moment and strikes up a conversation with the woman. The main character wonders if they know each other. After the disappearance of Lady Julia, the Queen's former protector, it seemed to her that there were almost no female guards left. At that moment, someone remarks that it is Duke Flopin himself standing before them. That means the famous lady is right there beside him. Jubelian decides it would be best for her to find a quiet place. A short while later, she opens one of the doors and suddenly locks eyes with a man. The shopkeeper immediately exclaims, "Could it be that an angel has visited my store?" The main character feels embarrassed and realizes she's in the wrong place. She just wanted to hide in the nearest shop and is about to say something. But the shopkeeper says he likes ladies and asks what she wants to buy. Jubelian realizes she's acting completely out of character and doesn't need anything. At that moment, another man appears behind her and places money on the table. The main character looks at him and notices his red eyes. The guy glances at her, and Jubelian starts to wonder. Did she look at him too openly, and should she apologize? But the brunette just frowns. He asks what she's staring at and rudely tells her to leave. The girl notices his sharp features and fierce gaze. She was looking at him because he's handsome, but now she's thinking about how rudely he shooed her away. As she glares at the dark-haired man, the shopkeeper announces the price, 10 silver coins. The main character immediately says that she was just about to buy this item. The man asks if she is sure of her choice, and the girl replies that she is completely sure. The salesperson asks in surprise if she really needs an armor polishing kit. Jubelian looks slightly embarrassed. She explains that the hardware at home has lost its luster, and it would be a shame if it lost its shine completely. The salesman notes that one kit definitely won't be enough for the whole house. He asks her to wait and says he'll bring more from the warehouse right away. The main character tries to stop him, looking flustered. She realizes that things haven't gone according to plan. Meanwhile, the brunette just sighs heavily. Then he tosses a gold coin on the table and takes the polishing kit. The main character asks him to wait and says he forgot the change. She adds that he gave her a whole gold coin. But the guy is already walking away, and Jubalion tries to call out to him, asking if he can hear her. She wants to explain that he paid too much, but accidentally bumps into his back. When he turns around, the girl says that he might be a foreigner, since a single gold coin is enough for an ordinary family to live on for 2 weeks. And with that money, you could buy 10 sets like this. At that moment, the merchant happily declares that he happens to have 10 in stock. The main character quickly says she doesn't need that many, and clarifies that she didn't mean that. A short while later, someone approaches the Lord and informs him that they have returned. The servant relays that Duke Floen has invited him to visit the estate, and the young man agrees. The maid cautiously asks if something has happened to His Highness, the Crown Prince. The young man recalls the lady's words about 10 sets for a single coin, but then he just waves it off and says everything is fine. Meanwhile, the main character is already standing next to the Duke. The man looks at her purchases and asks what they are. The girl replies that they are armor polishing kits. She thinks about how that guy just walked away, as if money meant nothing to him. Her father sighs heavily and suggests they keep going. And the girl thinks that perhaps she too is just a trivial thing to him. She follows her father and feels that the day is dragging on endlessly, which is why she is so tired. Her feet start to hurt, and there's still a flight of stairs ahead that she has to climb. Jubalion realizes she needs a rest. But if she wants to inherit her father's entire fortune in the future, she definitely can't argue with him. A moment later, her foot slips off a step and she starts to fall. Her father catches her instantly and asks what's wrong. Jubalion just apologizes. She's sure he'll be angry, since she should have held on despite her fatigue and the rough day. But the man unexpectedly picks her up and says they're going back to the carriage. Jubalion tries to protest that she's fine, but the Duke asks her to be quiet and keeps walking. The heroine doesn't understand what's happening to her today and asks him to put her down, since she can continue shopping. But the Duke firmly states that they are going home. When she tries to argue, he asks her not to move. The lady realizes that it's incredibly difficult to understand her father. She's feeling worse and worse, and she doesn't understand why. The Duke says that sooner or later she'll meet a worthy man, but the girl can barely hear him and just nods. When he asks again how she's feeling, she replies that everything is fine and asks him not to worry. The next moment she loses consciousness, and her father cries out in alarm, as if this isn't the first time it's happened. A while later, the man asks Jubalion to wake up, saying he can't lose her. The girl thinks this is strange, since he has never called her that way before, and his face looks as if he is about to cry. A little while later, she opens her eyes and realizes it was just a nightmare. The doctor immediately asks how she's feeling. The girl, still not fully conscious, asks if it's really Alan. The guy says she was out for a long time, and everyone was very worried. Jubalion realizes she's been unconscious and asks how long she's been asleep. She is told that 3 days have passed. At that moment, the maids rush into the room and ask how she is feeling. The main character notices a mountain of gifts and asks in surprise what they are. A maid explains that they are gifts from noble ladies wishing her a speedy recovery. Jubalion doesn't believe it since she has no friends. Just then, her father enters the room and asks if she has woken up. The girl wonders if she's still awake. The man withdraws his hand and tells her to rest. Jubalion realizes that, as expected, he left right away, and she no longer has any hope. A cold father who ignores his sick daughter could ruin his reputation, so he did stop by to see her after all. While she was sick, the girl realized something. All those flowers and gifts weren't sent out of concern, but because of her last name. And without her father's money and influence, she won't be able to provide for herself. The maid asks if she really intends to reply to all the letters personally. The girl replies that she is. People have supported her, and according to etiquette, she is obligated to reply to everyone. The main character realizes that reputation comes first. She needs to repair the bad reputation she earned in the past. A short time later, the girl is already reading a book, while the maids look at her in surprise. She realizes that her next step must be to get an education. Even if her father doesn't leave her the duchy, she'll receive money, and she needs to learn how to manage it properly. The girl begins to prepare for an independent life, but realizes just how boring it is. She could never have imagined that her previous reluctance to study would lead to such difficulties. It feels as though she has suddenly grown up 10 years. But she accepts this as the price of independence, and, walking into one of the rooms, she spots her father there and immediately wishes him good morning. Jubalion is surprised to see him there. The man calmly points out that it is already noon, and the girl realizes she has misspoken. She quickly agrees with him. The Duke notices the textbooks in her hands and asks if it is a book on governing a duchy. He looks at her with a clear question in his eyes. Why does she need this? Jubalion replies that she simply became curious about his duties. Her father asks why she's suddenly interested in this topic. The heroine immediately wonders if he's decided she wants to take his place. She quickly replies that she's simply curious and has no ulterior motives. Her father calmly asks her to sit down. Jubelian recalls the doctor's advice that she mustn't get nervous or be subjected to severe stress. The girl realizes that her stress levels are through the roof right now. She tries to keep a smile on her face, since her father's mood remains a mystery. At some point, she realizes that if things continue in the same vein, she will lose consciousness again. The man suddenly asks if she knows the 3 elements of the duchy. The main character is a little surprised, but still answers that they are the structures, the land and the ruler's decrees, which all residents are obligated to obey. The man nods and says that's right. Jubelian adds that she just read about it in a book. Then the father remarks that since she knows everything, they can continue. And for the next few hours, he asks her questions as if he were conducting a real exam. The man is genuinely interested in her opinion, while the main character is increasingly confused as to why he's doing this. Another hour passes, and she, without letting on, is already wondering when this will finally end. And only after some more time has passed does the butler announce that the Duke has a guest. The girl realizes with relief that she is now free. As her father leaves, he glances at her for a moment, but Jubelian immediately looks down at her book, avoiding eye contact. The Duke smiles and hands her another book, telling her to read that one too. The heroine looks at it and realizes it's a textbook on tactics and strategy. Sometime later, she is still sitting with the book and decides that since her father told her to read it, she needs to see it through to the end. Suddenly, she notices a pendant inside the book and then heads off somewhere with it. The girl thinks her father might still be in his study, and it would be best to return the find to him. But at one of the turns, she hears a cry in which someone begs her not to try to send him into eternal sleep. Another voice coldly replies that it is not a request, but a warning. The other person says irritably that no intervention is needed. Jubelian realizes she has never seen her father argue like this before. She decides to quickly return the pendant and leave, but at that moment, the man says the other person's name. The heroine wonders, could his name really be Max? She becomes curious about who he is and why they're talking so freely. Watching his back, she realizes he doesn't look like a knight and suspects he might be a mercenary. Suddenly, the young man turns around, and the girl immediately hides around the corner. She realizes she almost got caught, and suddenly realizes that this is the same guy from the gun shop. The Duke says that the art of fencing is meant to protect what is dear to you, not to send someone into an eternal sleep. It seems the guy has forgotten that. The brunette coldly asks if such weaknesses are even necessary. Jubelian is surprised to hear the word teacher. She didn't even know her father was teaching anyone. The Duke replies that such weaknesses sometimes only make a person stronger. But the guy just turns away and says he doesn't want to hear it, he has things to do, and he leaves. Jubelian watches this and doesn't understand why he's acting so harshly. The Duke then tells Max that one day he'll understand everything, when someone comes along whom he'll want to protect at any cost. The main character wonders who he's talking about and whether her father has anyone that important in his life. After all, he allowed his daughter to fall into an eternal sleep. At that moment, the brunette declares that he doesn't know anything about loved ones, but he has found a rat hiding. The girl immediately thinks of real rats and realizes she hates them. The crown prince says he will catch this rat for the teacher's sake, and Jubelian mentally asks him to do so. But the Duke sharply forbids him from doing so. The girl doesn't understand why. She feels uneasy and wants to leave as soon as possible. The man says that if he lays a finger on her, he won't forgive him. The main character continues to watch, then quietly turns away. She decides to go back to her room because her life is more important and she can return the pendant later. When the Duke realizes his daughter has left, he turns to Max and asks if he knew who he had called that. The young man replies that he didn't get a good look at her. It was too dark. But he realizes there is only one person for whom the Duke would react this way. The man had taught him fencing for 10 years and once said that now he would teach him how to defend himself. The boy knows how strict and cold his teacher is, but there is one thing that makes him different. When he says the girl's name, the Duke smiles gently. The boy doesn't understand this and thinks his teacher has put a leash on himself. He clenches his fists and decides he will never allow himself such weakness. After that, he turns away and the Duke calls out his name. The man recalls how he was asked to look after the third son until the boy could defend himself. He promised then to fulfill the request, and the Empress told her son that he must survive. At the funeral, the young man heard whispers that he had been known ever since he fell out of the king's favor, and now he had no power. Some said she was a mother to the entire nation, but her funeral turned out to be far too modest. Others claimed it was all because she was weak. The Duke thinks he understands the young man's anger, for he himself was once the same. But he doesn't know what it's like to have a daughter. If it weren't for her, he would never have realized what a monster he was. One day, the young man will also meet someone who will mean everything to him. At that moment, the maid asks if there really is a rat somewhere, and the girl nods. The maid says that the rat catcher has already destroyed the nest, but the main character is certain that it was a large one and that someone might have slipped away. The maid tells her not to worry and promises to inform the butler. Jubilian insists that the rat must be caught as soon as possible, since they multiply quickly. Sometime later, the Duke asks what is troubling his daughter. The butler replies that she ordered the rat to be caught, but they found nothing. The man realizes it's a misunderstanding and that the girl simply misinterpreted Max's words. You can't catch a rat if there isn't one. After that, the Duke asks Derek where rats come from in the first place. The butler looks at him in surprise, but the Duke immediately says it doesn't matter and asks about the list of candidates for Jubilian. Derek replies that pedigree, appearance, wealth, and status are being considered, and the list will be ready soon. He also reports that a letter has arrived from Sir Mikhail. The Duke shows interest. Then he asks what this man wants. The butler replies that he demands an answer and accuses Milady of toying with him. He even wrote that she is trying to attract his attention. The Duke asks if this is true, and then he orders that no letter be delivered to Jubilian. The butler says he will pass on the order, but the Duke demands that he personally oversee everything, and if the letters keep coming, you should just burn them. Later, the maid reports that the rat has been caught. The main character is surprised and asks if that's true. The woman replies that yes, one got caught in the trap. It seems there are no more rats, and this one just wandered in by accident. Jubilian realizes that she can now walk around the house without worry. That is exactly why she had been hiding in the garden earlier. The maid adds that a letter has arrived for her. The heroine wonders if it's from Count Arlo, and if he's replied to her. Opening the letter, she realizes it's an invitation, and it was sent by Rosa, the very same girl who once tried to harm her and was one of the princess's friends. Things aren't exactly going well between them right now, and the letter includes an invitation to a banquet in 3 weeks. Jubilian asks Marilyn to bring flowers from the garden, and the other maid to bring ribbons and bows. She decides to act on her own, because independence is independence, and while she's at it, she asks for some cookies. The girl realizes she still needs to avoid anything that might send her into an eternal sleep. Sometime later, the lady with pink hair looks happily at the letter. In it, Jubilian congratulates her on her 17th birthday and writes that she was surprised by the invitation and hopes her presence won't be out of place. The girl realizes that the letter was written and decorated just for her, and she finds it very sweet. She even starts bouncing happily on the bed because the very fact that she received a reply was already a surprise. And the fact that Jubilian accepted the invitation completely blows her away. After all, she had actually admired her. At events, Rosa would always look at Jubilian and think she looked like a real doll. But when she approached her to say hello, the main character simply walked past and turned to Mikhail. She completely ignored Rosa. But now the girl thinks she's been forgiven, and she absolutely has to respond. Sometime later, the main character receives a beautifully decorated pink letter. Jubilian is surprised, as she hadn't expected a reply from the Count's daughter. She opens the letter and begins to read. As she reads, she smiles, realizing that Rosa has tried to imitate her writing style. But then she notices that the letter is a full 10 pages long, and she can't believe how happy Rosa is. Jubilian reads that a grand celebration awaits her. One maid remarks that her ladyship is reading the letter from her best friend so intently, while another jokes that she's about to burst into tears. The main character realizes that this isn't the case, but notices that Rosa is openly expressing her emotions and may be expecting the same from her. Meanwhile, in high society, people are discussing Lady Floyan's letter. One woman says she has finally grown up. Another objects, saying that people like her never change, and reminds everyone of her past behavior. However, someone points out that she used to act arrogantly, but now she has accepted the invitation. Others wonder what could have made her change her behavior, since she used to attend only royal banquets. After all, Rosa is just the Count's daughter, not a particularly prominent figure, and it makes one wonder what Jubilian has in mind. Someone asks whether it has become fashionable to decorate letters with flowers and ribbons. Another replies that if Lady Floyan did it, then it must already be in fashion. Mikhail, listening to all this, clenches his fist and wonders if Jubilian has now set her sights on Count Arlo's daughter. After a while, the young man returns to his mansion and immediately tells the butler to tell Count Arlo that he accepts the invitation to the banquet. The butler nods in response. Then he asks if any letters have arrived for him. The servant replies that there haven't been any and cautiously asks if the master is expecting anyone. The young man coldly says no and dismisses the butler. The butler leaves in silence. As soon as the door closes, Mikhail clenches his fists in frustration. He can't believe the girl dared to ignore his letters. In his mind, it looks as if Jubilian is desperately trying to get his attention. But he's sure she'll regret it. Meanwhile, the heroine is thinking about how hard it all is for her. Lady Arlo's birthday is coming up, and she can't afford to give a bad gift. Besides, she just wanted to go shopping in peace without unnecessary attention or an escort. But recently, the Duke made it clear that she could only go out accompanied by knights. And there turned out to be as many as 12 of them. Yet all she wanted was a quiet life. After a while, they stop in front of a dilapidated building, and one of the knights asks if she's sure she wants to go inside. This guy turns out to be her cousin, and Jubilian asks Sir Galordon to act formally, since there are a lot of people around. She confidently says she'll go in. There's a trendy workshop nearby, though the knight himself finds her choice strange. When the main character goes inside, she sees that everything is sealed off. Amid the chaos sits a man, clearly overwhelmed by what is happening. When he sees her, he apologizes and says he can't work right now. He doesn't know which family she belongs to, but suggests she go to another workshop. The knight quietly suggests she leave, but the girl calmly hands him an umbrella and says everything is fine. After that, she turns to Jan Fedor and says she wants to place an order with him. The guy is surprised and asks why she chose him specifically. The main character replies that only he is capable of creating what she needs. But he shyly asks her to leave, since he's not in a state to work right now. As he turns away, the girl calmly says that she believes in him. Fedor turns around, clearly taken by surprise, and asks if that's true. She confirms it with confidence. She says that his work is far more beautiful than anyone else's. After all, he is the best craftsman in the entire empire. The guy can't hold back his tears, but quickly makes an excuse, as if something had just gotten in his eye. Jubilian realizes that right now he's feeling down because of the inheritance and problems with the business. But in just 6 months, he'll become the best craftsman and enter high society, thanks to the ornament for the princess. The girl realizes that this is her chance to build a connection with him before his value rises. Fedor asks if she can tell him more about the order. The heroine agrees and is delighted that he has accepted the proposal after all. Just then, a servant approaches the Duke. He reports that the list of candidates is ready. The Duke looks at it and notices Maximilian's name, then orders it to be crossed out. At that moment, another servant enters the office and hands him a letter from the emperor. It contains an order to report to the palace immediately. Meanwhile, the main character is strolling through the market square. The girl realizes that the order has already been placed, and now she can choose something for herself. Last time, thoughts of her father got in the way. Now, despite the presence of the knights, she decides to focus on herself and notices some beautiful cufflinks. They immediately catch her eye, and she imagines how they would look on her father. Jubilian is sure they'll suit him, and decides to give them to him along with the pendant. She's a little worried, since she hasn't been able to return the pendant for so long, but she hopes the gift will soften him. Just then, another person walks into the shop and recognizes her. The main character sees his smirk and realizes it's Radian. He is Mikhail's cousin and a notorious gossip in high society, known for his sharp tongue. The girl responds politely and thinks that, to be fair, he should have pretended not to know her. But he asks why she's addressing him so formally and feigns disappointment. He says she shouldn't have changed her tone just because she broke up with Mikhail. Then he takes her hand and asks her to just call him Radian, all with a smug smile. The main character thinks this is extremely rude, but decides not to show her irritation. She realizes he's deliberately provoking her, since he loves spreading rumors. The girl gently pulls her hand away and says she'd be happy to continue the conversation. But she has things to do, and it's time for her to go. Radian remarks mockingly that it looks more like an escape. She simply says goodbye, takes the cufflinks, and leaves. Radian stays behind, watching her with a smirk. He wonders why she's buying men's cufflinks, given that she recently broke up with Mikhail, and he's curious to see how Mikhail will react. Sometime later, the Duke is already in the palace of the Asset Empire and asks if the Emperor summoned him. The Emperor turns to Duke Floyan and says that a rat has appeared in the palace. He explains that he cannot sleep peacefully until the situation changes and asks the most trustworthy person to look into it. The Duke agrees and realizes that the question is, who is behind the descent into eternal sleep? The Emperor adds that this person acted alone and left no traces. Therefore, the Duke must remain at the palace and conduct the investigation from within. He agrees to stay for a few days. The Emperor smiles with satisfaction and says that now he can rest easy. Later, one of the knights asks if he will really carry out the order, since without evidence, the investigation will drag on. Besides, he is a hero of the Empire and is under no obligation to do this. But the Duke calmly reminds him that they are in the palace and must watch their words. He warns that they shouldn't draw unnecessary attention. At that moment, someone is watching them from a tree. The guy can't believe the Duke is letting himself be treated this way. Max is disappointed and wonders how much longer the Duke will continue to obey the Emperor because of his weakness. Just then, a man approaches the Duke and informs him that the escort went smoothly. The man asks about Jubilian and is told that she was looking for a gift for Rosa and was very happy to receive the invitation. The Duke smiles upon hearing this. The Crown Prince watches him and doesn't understand where this joy is coming from. He wonders if it's really just because they're family and she's so dear to him. He used to think of the Duke as a man capable of destroying everything in his path. But when it comes to her, he becomes gentle and open. Meanwhile, the king exploits this as a weakness. He literally keeps the duke under control, and the young man recalls his teacher's words that such weaknesses can make one stronger, but the brunette thinks that's complete nonsense. And he decides to take a look at this weakness for himself. Just then, Radian comes to visit Mikhail. He greets him and immediately complains of fatigue, settling in more comfortably. Mikhail asks why he came. Radian replies that he has good news, but first asks for tea. Mikhail impatiently asks him to get to the point. Then Radian says with a smirk that it's probably because of his temperament that Jubelian left him. Mikhail turns sharply and demands an explanation. Radian claims that he saw her buying the gift himself. And they were men's cufflinks. He's hinting that Mikhail should realize where this is leading. Gifts like this are only given to close friends, and for lovers, it's a sign of a special bond. Mikhail begins to think she has someone else. Radian just smirks and asks if that isn't good news. After all, he was worried that she was just playing with him for attention. At that moment, the butler appears, and Radian offers to bring tea, but Mikhail rudely orders him to leave. He says that if the butler has said everything, he can leave. Radian calmly says goodbye, pretending to be innocent. He pretends not to understand what caused such a reaction. Mikhail is in shock and can't believe that Jubelian has found someone else. He remembers how she used to say she loved him, and can't understand how she could have moved on so quickly. In a rage, he slams his fist on the table. The butler asks anxiously if everything is all right. Mikhail mutters through clenched teeth that she'll pay for this. Meanwhile, the heroine is standing by the window. She thinks her father is running late again because of work and looks visibly sad. The maid informs her that he is conducting training and will be away for several days. Jubelian quietly asks if this is true. She realizes that she wanted to return the pendant as soon as possible and give him the gift. The maid thinks she's upset because it's missing. Later, the main character falls asleep with a book in her hands, and at that moment, someone opens the door from the balcony. The guy looks at her and thinks she looks weak and defenseless, as if she could fall into an eternal sleep at the slightest touch. He doesn't understand why the teacher is so obsessed with her. It seems to him that he could easily send her into an eternal sleep with a single movement. But suddenly, the girl opens her eyes and calmly says that he must have come to the wrong house. The brunette is surprised, since she wasn't scared, and Jubelian calmly explains that this is Duke Floyan's residence. The guy doesn't understand what's wrong with her. In his opinion, she should be afraid, but instead she remains surprisingly calm. The brunette replies sharply that he's not mistaken. The main character calmly asks, if that's the case, why doesn't he change his mind? Otherwise, he might regret it. She adds that she won't fall into eternal sleep for another year, and sighs heavily. Max is surprised. Doesn't she understand at all what kind of situation she's in? Jubelian lights a candle, but the guy instantly knocks it out of her hands, thinking irritably how dare she turn on the light. He looks at her and notices that she is fearless yet weak. When the girl comes closer, she recognizes him as her father's student. At that moment, the dark-haired man recalls their meeting in town. He remembers how she said that money could buy 10 polishing kits. The heroine sighs with relief, glad that it isn't a stranger. When she woke up, a dark figure was standing before her, staring intently at her. At first she thought it was a dream, but she pinched herself and realized it was all happening in real life. If someone breaks in at night, it's either a thief or an assassin. And Jubelian, in shock, wonders who could want her to fall into an eternal sleep. She realizes it could be anyone, since she used to be cruel to people. The girl even wonders why she behaved so terribly in the past. But she can't just disappear now. After all, as the former lady-in-waiting, she can't just end things like this. Her fate was supposed to be decided later, at the princess's celebration. Realizing this, she pulls herself together and speaks to him. Fortunately, it turns out to be her father's student. Jubelian realizes how scared she was, and decides that next time she'll check the doors more carefully. The young man speaks rudely to her again, but the girl frowns and asks why he is so impolite. Even if he is her father's student, he should observe proper etiquette. But he just asks, why should I? Jubelian realizes that he's still a rude guy, and the whole situation is starting to annoy her. He barged in on her in the middle of the night and scared her. If he weren't her father's student, she would have already dealt with him. Just then, a voice comes from behind the door, asking if everything is all right. The girl gets out of bed to answer. But in that very second, a dagger is pressed against her neck and she freezes. The voice outside the door asks again how she is, and Jubelian looks at the brunette. She realizes he's waiting for an answer and says everything is fine, she just couldn't sleep, and decided to read. The knight replies with satisfaction and leaves. Jubelian says she did as he wished, and now he can put his gun away. The brunette looks puzzled, and she doesn't understand why he's angry. After all, he's the one who barged in on her, so it's his own fault. After saying this, the girl yawns. The crown prince watches this in shock, while Jubelian realizes she did it unconsciously because she was tired. He asks what she's doing, and she calmly replies that she wants to sleep, since he woke her up. She asks if he can just leave. The brunette says he doesn't have a home. The girl wonders if he really is a mercenary. She asks if he really just wanders the streets, and the guy nods. Jubilian recalls that mercenaries usually live in taverns, and he looks as if he's been abandoned. She wonders if he's been kicked out of his home, and maybe he came to her father because he had nowhere else to go. Last time, he was alone too, and he came secretly. Now she assumes he just happened to end up in her room, having simply snuck into the house instead of using the front door. The girl sighs and realizes there's nothing she can do. Since her father isn't home right now, she says that if he has nowhere else to go, he can stay with them for a little while. The brunette is surprised, and Jubilian explains that she has to take care of her father's guests. She notices a blanket nearby, picks it up, and hands it to the guy. As she hands it to him, she says there's no need to thank her. He can repay her later. The brunette looks at her in bewilderment, while the girl calmly lies down on the bed and tells him to find a place to sleep himself. And she really does fall asleep. The crown prince remains bewildered, trying to figure out what just happened. He wonders why she wasn't afraid, since everyone usually fears him. Even if someone hides their fear, it's still visible, but her gaze was calm and confident. He decides not to dwell on it. To him, she's just a nuisance he needs to get rid of right now. If he can overcome the Duke's weakness, he will free him from the Emperor's influence and achieve his goals. But suddenly, he remembers how she had smiled as she called him his father's apprentice, and he freezes. He notices how peacefully she is sleeping, and suddenly feels himself beginning to doze off. This seems strange, for the ability to stay awake and be ready for battle is the foundation of any knight. Even on a rest stop, one must not relax, so he must not fall asleep. But, looking at her peaceful face, he thinks he can just lie down for a couple of minutes. And without realizing it, he falls asleep. Meanwhile, the heroine has a dream. In it, a huge dragon appears, and people scream in panic, urging everyone to flee. She finds herself alone among them, stumbles, and falls. She's in pain. She's trembling, and suddenly she hears a shout about how this monster dares to chase someone's daughter. The voice sounds familiar, and she thinks it's her father. Opening her eyes, she realizes it was just a dream about a dragon, which she rarely has. She turns over and thinks it's a good sign. It means the day will be a good one. But the next moment, she sees the crown prince's face right in front of her and is shocked. He is sleeping peacefully in her room, right in her bed. The girl doesn't dare wake him. She just sits next to him and thinks that probably nothing terrible has happened. As she studies his face, she notices that he's rough around the edges, yet incredibly handsome, almost more handsome than Mikhail. An absurd image flashes through her mind, as if she were being accused of kidnapping and holding a handsome guy captive. She realizes how ridiculous that is and decides to wake him up. But the moment she reaches out, he abruptly grabs her and throws her to the floor, looming over her. The crown prince asks what she's doing, and the girl stares at him in shock. Then she calmly says that he must have slept very well, since he's so alert. Max is amazed that he fell asleep at all, and Jubilian thinks how ungrateful since she even let him sleep. She's starting to get annoyed by what's happening. He barged into her room, took her bed, and now he's even getting upset. Suddenly, she starts laughing. The brunette asks grimly what's so funny. She finds it hard to stop, because he reminds her of someone. This guy is like the black cat she knew as a child. That cat behaved the same way, coming in whenever it wanted, sleeping wherever it pleased, and staying sassy to the very end. Jubilian can't stop laughing, because the resemblance is too obvious. Just then, the maid knocks on the door and asks if the lady is awake. The girl realizes she needs to calm down immediately and pull herself together. She asks him to wait a moment and pulls him along. He's annoyed, but he goes along. Jubilian decides to hide him in the closet and tells him to sit quietly, or else people might get the wrong idea. The brunette asks what exactly she means. She replies that people might think they spent the night together. The crown prince gets annoyed, saying he doesn't have time for this. But the girl calmly remarks that in animals, this is called mating, and he freezes. He protests, embarrassed, but she quickly covers his mouth. She whispers for him to be quiet, because if the maid's here, things will only get worse. Outside, the maid thinks she heard something and calls out to Marilyn, preparing to open the door. She tugs on the doorknob and is surprised to find that the door is locked. Jubilian quietly tells the guy to trust her and hide in the closet. He reluctantly agrees and hides, and she smiles. The girl says he should have done that right away, and even pats him on the head. He asks irritably how she dares to do that, but at that moment the maid's voice is heard again, and Jubilian replies that she's coming. She closes the closet, leaving him inside. When the maid enters, she asks if everything is okay. The girl apologizes for the disturbance and says everything is fine. She explains that she was simply afraid someone might break in. The maid is surprised, since this is the Duke's house, and no one would dare break in here. Jubilian smiles, realizing that someone already has. She says she was just being cautious. Since her father isn't home, the maid decides she's worried about him. Meanwhile, Jubilian thinks her guest in the closet had better stay quiet. The maid takes her by the hands and assures her that the Duke will be fine. She suggests going for a walk to take her mind off things. Suddenly, the maid notices the bruises on the girl's hands and gasps. Meanwhile, the brunette is sitting in the closet, wondering irritably how much longer this is going to go on. He doesn't understand what he's even doing in this situation, but he comes to the conclusion that this lady is really strange. Instead of getting scared, she just laughed. The guy looks at her and doesn't understand what's wrong with her. 20 minutes later, the brunette in the closet starts to get annoyed and wonders where she's gone. Suddenly, he hears a strange moan. He listens closely, trying to figure out what's going on. Meanwhile, Jubilian asks Marilyn to lower herself further. Then she cries out in pain, and the Crown Prince, in shock, doesn't understand what's going on. For a split second, a ridiculous thought crosses his mind, but he immediately snaps out of it, realizing how absurd it is. He's about to open the door when he hears the maid offer to call a doctor and bring some painkillers. The girl refuses and says she's fine. Max doesn't understand why she needs help if she isn't injured. Marilyn insists, since she has bruises all over her arm and even on her shoulder. The brunette wonders where her injuries came from. Jubilian calmly says it's her own fault. She explains that she simply fell out of bed. At that moment, the guy remembers how he himself threw her to the floor that morning. He realizes that this is exactly when she was hurt, and he clenches his fists, thinking how easily a vulnerable person can be hurt. He makes sure this is clear, and the maid advises the lady to get more rest. When the maid leaves, Jubilian walks over to the wardrobe and opens it. With a smile, she says he can come out and asks if he's hungry. She suggests they have breakfast together. The brunette is surprised and asks why, and she simply replies that it tastes better that way. She takes his hand and pulls him along, assuring him that they have an excellent chef. Max follows her, looking confused. After a while, he sees sandwiches in front of him. He can't believe that when she said breakfast together, she meant cucumber sandwiches. And that's his least favorite food. He picks one up anyway. He wonders if he's really going to eat it, since he originally came here for a completely different reason. But when Jubilian looks at him, he puts the sandwich in his mouth anyway. The girl asks if he likes it. He thinks it's awful. But he swallows it anyway and nods, not even realizing what he's doing. Jubilian smiles with relief, glad that he liked it. He takes another bite and suddenly realizes that the cucumbers aren't so bad after all. Every day, a huge number of people pass through the palace of the Acid Empire. One of the men had heard that Duke Florian personally guards the emperor. When he approaches the door, he is stopped by knights. He declares that he has come for an audience. He realizes that if the situation continues, unrest could break out, just as it did before. This man is the Chancellor and Duke of Elios. He asks the emperor about his decision. The emperor replies that it is obvious, for there is no one more loyal than the Duke. Elios sighs and recalls the events of 10 years ago. At that time, the empire was fighting a grueling war, and the young king proved weak and tried to flee. But one knight decided to defend the country and brought victory. Now that knight is the emperor, and his ally is Duke Florian. Thanks to his support, the coup was successfully thwarted. But the people still remember what their ruler was like, and Elios warns that discontent could flare up again. He suggests luring the assassin into a trap, but the emperor merely stares at him coldly. Then he says he knows what he's doing and lets the Duke go. Elios insists that his reputation is still at risk. He advises bringing back the Crown Prince if he wants to keep the Duke under control. The emperor is annoyed that this man is trying to lecture him. But he is certain that the Duke cannot betray him as long as he has a weakness. At that moment, the main character yawns, feeling sleepy after her meal. She notices the guy has made himself comfortable on the couch, not even realizing that it's her spot. The brunette looks at her and asks what's wrong. Jubilian wonders if he's been sleeping. She wonders when he'll leave, since he can't possibly stay until her father returns. The Crown Prince asks why she's looking at him like that. The girl asks about his relationship with her father. He replies that everything is fine, and it seems to her that this was obvious anyway. She recalls how warm her father's voice was and how gentle his expression had become. The girl remembers that she wanted to return the pendant and give him the cufflinks. And since this guy is her father's student, he must know what her father likes. The brunette says that if she wants to ask something, she should just say so. Jubilian gets a little flustered and asks if it's a good gift. He asks which gift she's talking about, and she hides her face behind a book. She's afraid to hear that the gift is bad and starts to worry about why he's silent. Suddenly, the Crown Prince steps closer and takes the book from her. He asks who the gift is for. The girl is surprised at how quickly he appeared beside her. She hints that he should be able to figure it out himself. The guy remembers how he was told about her past with Mikhail, and he wonders if she really wants to be with him again. He calls it pathetic. He says that someone like that doesn't deserve gifts. The girl apologizes, but points out that he's going too far. The brunette thinks he's worried about her, since she's defending Mikhail so fiercely. He doesn't understand how anyone could be so obsessed with such a mediocre person. But the main character replies that that's not the point. She wants to mend their relationship. After all, we're talking about her father. Silence follows these words. The brunette asks if she was talking specifically about him. Jubelian doesn't understand who else she could have been referring to. His expression changes, and he suddenly smiles. The girl doesn't understand what's going on. She asks him to stop smiling and just say something. He asks if she really wants to give him the cufflinks, and she shows them to him. Max says it's a useless gift, and the girl gets annoyed. She sarcastically remarks that he must be an expert on gifts. He replies that he recently sent a gift to his own father, and adds that his father certainly won't be bored now. Jubelian asks what exactly he gave him, but he refuses to answer and says that the Duke would gladly accept any gift from her. Jubelian doesn't believe him and thinks he's saying strange things. She says that if it were that simple, she wouldn't be asking. The brunette is surprised. Doesn't she realize how much her father means to her? The girl decides to give him the cufflinks anyway, and the guy thinks the Duke is willing to do anything for her. But he doesn't know if she realizes this herself, and that makes him feel uneasy. Meanwhile, the Duke is sitting in a tree, and a bird flies up to him, tugging at his hair. He puts it on his finger and asks it to fly away, since his daughter is afraid of small animals. Just then, a man approaches him with news from home. The Duke immediately asks what has happened. Upon hearing the name Jubelian, he jumps to his feet. He asks anxiously if something has happened to her. The servant is startled and replies that everything is fine. The lady is just worried that he hasn't returned. The Duke is surprised, since she's never been this worried before. He smiles involuntarily, and the servant notices this with surprise. Then he adds that she isn't feeling well and hasn't left her room. The man grows serious and realizes it's time to put an end to this drawn-out game with Max. He decides to meet with the Emperor immediately. Meanwhile, Jubelian is sitting in the residence, and the Crown Prince tells her she doesn't have to write a letter. She replies that it would be rude to simply hand over the gift, and tears up yet another failed draft. She doesn't know what to write, since she wants to mend her relationship with her father. She turns to Max and asks what he usually talks about with her father. He thinks for a moment, and recalls how the Duke used to talk about his daughter. About how she's been smart since childhood, reading books since she was 5. And even the brooch he wears was made by her own hands. He realizes that the Duke talks about her all the time. But he replies aloud that he doesn't know, since they haven't spoken much. Jubelian realizes that he's not much help, and decides to handle it herself. An hour later, she is pleased with the result and smiles as she looks at the letter. The brunette peeks over and asks in surprise, "Are you really going to send this as is?" The young woman confidently replies that, of course, she understands everything. She admits her mistakes and, with sincere humility, asks for forgiveness, trying to show that she truly regrets her actions. The brunette reads the letter carefully. In it, the lady explains that when she opened the book, a pendant accidentally fell out. She wanted to return it right away, but circumstances prevented her from doing so now she admits her guilt and sincerely asks for forgiveness. The lady also asks him to accept the cufflinks as a token of her apology, and she repeats her request for forgiveness for not being able to return the pendant in time. After that, the girl says with a slight smile that she'll send everything. As she leaves, she adds that he knows what to do if someone happens to walk in. The heroine assures him she'll be back soon, and the guy wishes her luck in response, as if sensing that things might not go so smoothly. Left alone, he begins to imagine the look on the teacher's face. At the same time, in the Imperial Palace, in the audience chamber, a completely different scene is unfolding. The Emperor addresses the Duke and reminds him that several days have already passed since he tasked him with finding the culprit behind the incident. But there is still no news. The Duke calmly replies that he is still trying to track down the person behind this. In response, the Emperor slams his fist on the table and asks irritably if that's all he wants to hear. He demands that he find that rat. The Duke immediately realizes that Max called his daughter a rat, and there is a rather grim irony in that. He quickly realizes that Max is the one behind the assassination attempt, since he was clearly trying to pit him against the Emperor. The Crown Prince's words come to mind, whether he fears this weakling, and now the man clearly understands that he feels no fear. He does not oppose the Emperor simply because the right moment has not yet arrived, and when the Emperor catches his gaze, he involuntarily flinches. In response, the Duke calmly declares that there will be no more attempts to send anyone into eternal sleep. The Emperor immediately asks where such confidence comes from. The Duke explains that the palace is well guarded, and he personally escorted His Majesty. It seems the attackers have already drawn attention and won't want to do it again. The Emperor realizes that the Duke simply wants to return home as soon as possible, and is outraged that he would dare to behave this way. Meanwhile, the Duke adds that since the situation is still unclear, he will stay for one more day. The Emperor feels that this man is getting on his nerves more and more, the words of another duke come to mind. If he wants to keep Florian in check, he should return the crown prince. And the ruler realizes that this is indeed true. Besides, it has been a long time since he last spoke with Regis, whom he considered a weakness. A plan takes shape in his mind. He decides to take the duke under his control again and bring back the crown prince, pretending that he is about to hand over the throne to him. But only on the condition that he helps him keep that idiot in check. Meanwhile, the main character thinks her father is a real workaholic and will surely head straight to his office. When the lady walks in, she sees documents neatly laid out on the desk. Everything is perfectly organized. The girl can't help but wonder if the office has always been this spacious. At the same time, she's glad her father isn't there. Jubilian realizes she wouldn't be able to give the gift in person, so she decides to just leave it on the desk. But suddenly her gaze falls on a list of candidates. She doesn't understand what it is. The next moment, she drops the box in shock upon spotting a familiar name on the list. The girl can't believe her eyes. Why is the crown prince's name there? Could it be that her father wants to marry her off to Maximilian Kishin-Asset? Her hands begin to tremble. She realizes that he hadn't even told her anything. A conversation at the dinner table comes to mind. Back then, her father had asked what she considered the ideal man. She had replied that he must have money, honor, a family, as well as good looks and abilities. And now Jubilian realizes that this is a list of potential husbands. Maximilian Kishin-Asset is the crown prince who has all of these things. But he is also cruel. This man even put his own father to sleep forever for the sake of the throne. A ruthless psychopath and the novel's main villain. What's more, he was going to torture her, and now the girl is terrified, wondering if her father really wants to marry her off to such a man. With tears in her eyes, Jubilian cannot understand how he could have done this to her. Meanwhile, the dark-haired man sits alone in the room, staring at the door. He wonders if she has always been this tall, and when the lady will return. Why is she taking so long? Suddenly, he hears a rustle and instantly grabs whoever made the noise, asking what they're doing here. The servant asks to be let go. When the dark-haired man doesn't loosen his grip, the servant explains that the lady sent him, since she said His Highness would be here. The man immediately lets him go, and with a cold threat, asks again what is going on. The messenger says that the emperor is acting strangely, to which the dark-haired man replies that this is not surprising. After all, his gift was meant to throw him off balance. But that's not the point. The emperor has accepted the proposal from the chancellor and other officials. He wants the crown prince back. With these words, the envoy hands him a sword and announces that it is time for His Highness, Crown Prince Maximilian, to return. At that moment, the heroine realizes she must return to the room immediately. She will not allow herself to be sold to a tyrant. But the entire royal family is against her, and it will be extremely difficult to stand up to the crown prince. The girl decides she must convince her father to change his mind. She needs a reason to turn down the crown prince. And she can't reveal that she already knows about the list of candidates. When she returns to the room, she sees no one on the sofa and thinks the young man might have hidden from the maids. She quietly says she's back, but there's no answer. She opens the closet and asks if he's there. Then she looks behind the mirror, under the bed, but he's nowhere to be found. Jubilian wonders, bewildered, where he has disappeared to. She has enough problems as it is, and then she notices a note. After reading it, she realizes that the guy has left and is asking her not to look for him, promising to return when the time is right. The girl thinks even a cat would have written more politely, but she admits that she didn't ask him to come back herself. The room becomes uncharacteristically quiet. She murmurs that he left so suddenly, and yet she wanted to say goodbye in person. Meanwhile, the brunette is riding off somewhere on horseback. He wonders if she read the note, and why he wrote it in the first place. And what if the girl doesn't even come looking for him? It had seemed so natural to him to be in their house. As a farewell, he looks at the house one last time from the top of the hill. The servant looks at the crown prince in surprise, but he just keeps riding and says they'll take a shortcut. A short while later, the main character wakes up and doesn't understand why it's so bright, and why he didn't wake her up. But then she notices the note in her hands and remembers that he's left. She wonders if he found a place to stay, but she immediately snaps out of it. She has more important things to do. She realizes she fell asleep trying to come up with a plan, but never did. The girl looks at the gift for her father again and imagines him asking coldly why he needs these cufflinks. She realizes she needs to return the pendant as soon as possible. And with each passing day, there's more and more to do. The maids have noticed that the lady is acting strangely. She used to go for long walks, but now she hardly ever goes out. She just stares out the window, and it seems the Duke's absence is really getting to her. Marilyn watches her and realizes that her mistress is particularly downcast today. After a while, she cautiously mentions that the weather is lovely today, but hears only a brief nod in response. Then Marilyn suggests going for a walk, since the warm sun might help her feel better. The girl doubts whether this is true. After all, she has always felt sad when she stayed home alone. The maid is almost in tears as she recalls how the young lady used to say she didn't want to stay home alone without her father. She realizes that, despite her selfishness and coldness, the lady has been lonely since childhood. In a burst of emotion, Marilyn hugs her and says she'll always be there for her. Later, they go outside, and the main character sits at a table with desserts. The maid notices that her favorite strawberry cupcakes are gone and immediately runs off, promising to make more. The girl wants to stop her, to say that everything is fine, but the maid is already disappearing. Jubillion thinks that maybe it's even better this way. She needs to be alone. She realizes she needs to come up with a plan before her father returns, and resolve everything before new problems arise. But in her desperation, she still doesn't know what to do. Suddenly she hears a voice saying, "Here she is." It turns out to be the Duke, who rides up to her on horseback. Jubillion is shocked to recognize her father and doesn't understand why he's back so early. She had expected to have more time. After all, the butler had said that the master would be away for a long time, and now she realizes that he has returned sooner than expected. She starts talking about her workout, asks if he's tired, suggests calling Marilyn to run a bath, and suddenly realizes she's talking about having dinner with him. She immediately realizes she'd better stop. The man looks at his daughter and calmly says that, from this moment on, he will never leave her alone again. The main character is taken aback. She doesn't understand why he's saying this so suddenly, and he explains that he wanted to get back as soon as possible and asks if she's had dinner. The girl replies that she hasn't yet, and the man says that even when he's not home, she needs to take care of herself, or she might faint again. At these words, Jubillion slumps. She realizes that in her current condition, it will be difficult to arrange a profitable marriage for her, and that this is exactly what her father has in mind. The man simply repeats that she must not faint again, and she becomes frightened. Now she won't even be able to tell him about a simple cold. The Duke steps closer and suggests they go to lunch. The girl wonders why he is taking her hand again, and remembers how, in the novel, he led his daughter into that terrifying room. She realizes it was naive to expect anything good from him. She used to follow him around, hoping to get even a little attention, but she doesn't do that anymore. A while later, they're sitting at the table, and she feels awkward. Having lunch together right after his return seems strange. The man says he heard about the invitation to the party next week. Jubillion replies that yes, the Count's daughter has invited her to a birthday celebration. The Duke asks who she'll go with, and the girl tenses up because she hasn't chosen anyone yet, and she's afraid he'll suggest someone from the list. She clutches her handkerchief and says she has received many invitations. Many people want to accompany her, and she says with a smile that it's wonderful, but she doesn't know whom to choose. The Duke looks closely at his daughter, then turns away, and calmly says he understands. The main character thinks to herself, "Did I really manage to get out of this?" But it's too early to relax. She needs to finish her meal quickly and write a letter right away. A short while later, she looks at a whole stack of letters and tells Marilyn that there turned out to be far more proposals than she expected. The maid assures her that her ladyship truly has plenty to choose from. The girl is skeptical and asks if it's really true. She begins to consider the candidates. The first is Sir Boromir, a member of the Imperial Knights, renowned for his skill in fencing and his impeccable manners. The second is the son of Count Lavant, renowned for his good looks and sharp mind. The third is the son of the Marquis of Crocus, who holds a high position in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. The lady recalls how she told her father that she would choose someone herself. But the candidates are so impressive that the choice becomes difficult. Ironically, it is thanks to her father that she has this opportunity. She thinks long and hard about whom to choose, and after some time tells Marilyn that it is already too late. Let them send the letter in the morning. The maid leaves the room, but in the hallway she unexpectedly runs into the Duke. He immediately asks how Jubillion is doing. The woman flinches in surprise. She says she can call the lady if he wants to speak with her, but the man calmly replies that there's no need. His gaze falls on the letter in her hands, and he asks if her daughter has made her choice. The maid replies that yes, she has, and she has chosen the son of Count Lavant. The Duke asks what people say about him. Marilyn replies that he's handsome, well known in high society, and considered a fine young man. The man frowns slightly and notes to himself that the young man has become famous precisely because of his looks. Marilyn, however, says excitedly that she can already picture them having fun and flirting. This scene seems very sweet to her, but when she opens her eyes, she realizes that the gentleman has already left. A short while later, the Duke is already sitting across from the Marquis, who with trembling hands doesn't understand why he's there. He politely asks what brings him on such a late visit, but receives only a cold stare in response. The Duke looks appraising LY at his revealing outfit, and the young man immediately lowers his gaze, adjusting his clothes. But the man continues to silently scrutinize him, recalling his daughter's words about how she would never marry a man without money, honor, family, good looks, or talent. And then she tells Edmund Assenlöwen straight out that he didn't make the cut. The next morning, the maid informs the lady that her order has arrived from Fyodor's workshop. The girl happily says, "Finally," since Rose's birthday is coming up soon, and she was worried they wouldn't get everything done in time. She reads the note, which says it's for his muse, and notices another little box, wondering if it's some kind of bonus. The maids admire the contents and ask what this beauty is, since they've never seen anything like it before. The girl realizes that Jan has charmed everyone again. She says she'll show them later, but just then there's another knock at the door. The butler says it is him, and the heroine asks what has happened. He replies that Edmund, the second son of the Count of Louvain, has arrived and wishes to respond to her letter in person. The girl is surprised that he came in person rather than sending a reply, but she decides that this is even better. They can get to know each other, and says she'll be down shortly. A short while later, the young man greets Lady Floyen, noting that it has been a long time since they last saw each other. The heroine returns the greeting, and the maid offers to show them into the parlor. Jubelian notices that he is indeed as handsome as people say, though he still can't compare to Mikhail. She thinks that her father's student, of course, isn't behaving in the best way, but he has his own charm. The girl can't help but hope that he's doing well and isn't going hungry. At that moment, the Count's son addresses her. She realizes she has been distracted during the conversation. The young man says he must explain the purpose of his visit, but suddenly he falls to his knees and asks her to accept his apology. Jubelian doesn't understand what's happening. He asks if she hasn't heard the rumors circulating in high society about how she supposedly has a relationship with someone. That is why he was so surprised by her letter. The girl is in shock. Could people really be saying such things about her, a homebody? She sighs, thinking about how many silly rumors are going around. It occurs to her that someone might have spotted her father's student through the window, but she tries not to panic. The main character confidently says that it's impossible, since she was home the whole time, and she has proof. The man says with relief that then it's just rumors, and apologizes again. Jubelian calmly replies that everything is fine, she'll just find another partner, and asks him to come upstairs. She thinks to herself that at least she's found out about the rumors, and if she tracks down the person who started them, they're in for a world of trouble. Just then, the guy steps closer and asks if she's an angel. After all, she forgave his rudeness so easily, and if he had passed the test, he would never have let her go. The girl is a little flustered. He hands her a rose and suggests they have lunch together sometime. But he suddenly freezes, noticing the Duke in the window, watching him grimly. The guy immediately turns pale, frantically apologizes, and says he has to go. Jubelian doesn't understand what happened to him. Meanwhile, an event is taking place in the flower-filled salon. One of the aristocratic ladies says that everyone is curious to see how the Count has decorated his home. Another replies that last year everything was awash with roses, and it's hard to imagine what surprises they'll have in store this time. But someone remarks that it's much more interesting to see who will be accompanying Lady Floraine to the ball. Many have come specifically because of the rumors about her. One of the girls asks if anyone knows who Lady Floraine is seeing now after her breakup with Mikhail Hassan. Another replies that she's heard about her seeing someone, but doesn't know exactly who. Some people speculate that it might be someone who never appears in public, which makes it even more intriguing. Suddenly, someone drops a glass, which shatters with a crash. It turns out to be the Crown Prince. Everyone turns to him, and he asks with cold fury, "Do you really enjoy spreading such empty rumors?" One of the ladies is offended by his tone and says they have witnesses. But the man steps closer and asks if she saw it herself. The girl starts to make excuses, saying that even if she didn't, rumors don't just come out of nowhere, and her friends agree. But the man coldly suggests she say that to Lady Floraine herself, to her face. After that, she falls silent and turns away, and the others avoid his gaze as well. The man thinks contemptuously about how pathetic they are and says that believing such rumors is simply absurd. As he leaves, he thinks that this is bad, and he doesn't understand why it made him so angry. A short while later, the brunette is already sitting on the couch, and the salon owner, Madame Prisha, greets him cheerfully. She says she hasn't seen him in a long time and asks if he'll share any interesting news. The man replies that he has no intention of going back there since it's a complete mess. The woman is surprised, since it seemed to her that everything was the same as before. Then she turns to the Crown Prince and asks what exactly has upset him so much. After all, it seems he didn't like the talk about Lady Floyen. He asks coldly, "Is slander now called information?" The woman calmly replies that there's no smoke without fire, and notes that he usually hides his emotions better. "I wonder what really got to him. He used to never deign to speak to anyone at all." The brunette replies that these people have become too brazen, and he simply wants to silence them. The landlady merely smiles, realizing that after his visit to Duke Floyen, he has become even stranger. The man demands the truth about Lady Floyen. The woman immediately says that the rumors of a secret affair are lies, and he breathes a sigh of relief. She then adds that the lady sent a letter to the Earl of Louvain's son, asking him to be her partner at the ball. She wonders why he was chosen, and answers her own question by saying that he is handsome and well-mannered. although there are rumors that he is a real womanizer who has caused many girls to shed tears. The man says he understands. He recalls his teacher's words about how she likes handsome men, but still doesn't understand what makes good looks so special. The woman adds that she doesn't know if this will please him, but young Mr. Levin turned her down. At that moment, the man clenches his fist and snaps, asking who he thinks he is. Since he dared to reject someone, his companion wonders what is happening to him. She goes on to say that the rumors about the lady's secret romance were spread by Viscount Droyle's son. She clarifies that he is Mikhail Hassan's cousin. His Highness asks sharply if she is referring to Mikhail. The woman notes with a smile that it's amusing, since the lady used to be with him. And now he's just watching as his cousin ruins her reputation. The dark-haired man stands up abruptly and orders that all information be gathered on the vulnerabilities of the Hassans and the Droyles, as well as on those who have vied for the role of the lady's partner. The woman agrees, but thinks to herself that Duke Florian has already bought that information. She wants to say something, but realizes that His Highness has already left. Meanwhile, the main character is sitting at the table with her father and realizes they are drinking tea alone. She doesn't understand how this even happened. As soon as young Mr. Levin left, her father immediately appeared. Just 5 minutes ago, she asked if he had been there, and he calmly replied that he had simply met her at the right time, since his throat was dry. The girl realizes that this is a forced tea party and thinks how tedious these rules are. The Duke asks if she has found a partner. She realizes that if she tells the truth, he'll immediately set her up with someone else. So she replies that she's still considering her options. The man says that if she doesn't find anyone, she must be sure to tell him, and the girl worries about what he might do then. After a while, she gets up and says she's going to her room. The man informs her that he'll be leaving later on urgent business. She's surprised and doesn't understand why he's telling her this. The Duke replies that he has to warn someone. The girl realizes she doesn't know who he's talking about, but doesn't dare to ask. He adds that he'll be back before dinner, and she quietly agrees. The lady ponders his words and realizes that this warning might apply to her as well. The brunette watches the Duke and notices something odd. The Duke suddenly starts leaving the house so late, even though he hardly ever used to be there before. This clearly breaks the usual pattern and gives him pause. When the Duke leaves, the young man deftly climbs onto the balcony of the lady's room. But as soon as he steps inside, he immediately realizes she isn't there. The room is empty. He begins to wonder where the lady could be now. Could she have gone to the library again, as she often does? Another thought crosses his mind. What if she's gone to send an invitation letter to a new potential partner? The Crown Prince snaps himself out of it in irritation. He even curses under his breath, realizing that it shouldn't matter to him at all, whether she finds a partner or not. At that moment, a voice rings out behind him. Someone asks what he's doing in her room. It turns out to be the main character herself. The brunette immediately steps closer to her and asks right away where she's been. Jubelian is shocked, thinking, is that really the first thing you decided to say when they met? She replies that she was downstairs, and the guy just turns away and says curtly that he understands. The heroine smiles to herself. The situation seems absurd to her. He appeared out of nowhere and is acting as if this were perfectly normal. The lady wonders if the words in the note were true. She says that if he came to see her father, he must have had urgent business, but her father isn't home. The young man calmly replies that he knows. He saw the Duke leave himself. After that, he sits down on the sofa without a hint of embarrassment. And the main character doesn't understand why he came at all if he knew her father wasn't there. She has enough on her mind as it is. And suddenly, the guy is right next to her and asks why she's sighing so heavily. She's startled, because just a second ago he was sitting on the couch. The girl explains that she's just got too much on her plate and it's giving her a headache. Max asks what happened and suggests she tell him everything. He promises to keep it a secret. The main character realizes that it might be easier if she just gets it off her chest. But first, she asks him to promise that he'll never tell her father about it. The guy agrees. He makes the promise, and then she adds a condition. If he breaks his word, he'll owe her 100 gold bars. The man replies that he agrees, and even if he lets it slip by accident, he'll give her his entire fortune. The girl just smiles, wondering how someone without a home of their own can risk their entire fortune. She jokes that she'll squeeze every last penny out of him. The guy is slightly embarrassed, but quickly pulls himself together. He says that since everything's settled, she should just go ahead and tell him. Jubelian agrees and confesses. Right now, someone is spreading malicious rumors about her, claiming that Lady Florian is secretly seeing an unknown man. She says she isn't ashamed of the very idea of a secret romance. But she knows perfectly well that nothing of the sort has ever happened in her life, and, frankly, she couldn't care less about what others say. However, the consequences turned out to be serious. Everyone she asked to be her date turned her down precisely because of those rumors. Meanwhile, the brunette thinks to himself what fools they are. They didn't even bother to figure things out, yet they believed everything. He catches himself thinking that if he could, he would go to the reception with her himself, and immediately he snaps himself out of it, not understanding where such an idea even came from. He tries to calm down and focus on the conversation. Jubalion says she could go alone, and the dark-haired man asks what the problem is. The lady explains that her father is planning to marry her off. The man is stunned and can't believe it. She adds that she saw a list of suitors on his desk. It seems the Duke already has a candidate in mind. Indignation flares up in her mind. Could he really do such a thing to his own daughter? She wonders if his concern was just a pretense. And she explains that she needs to make it seem to her father as if she already has a date for the ball. Because if she doesn't have a partner, her father will definitely try to set her up with someone from the list. The brunette remarks that perhaps a suitable partner is closer than she thinks. The heroine doesn't understand what he's talking about. She suddenly stands up, as if realizing something. The girl grabs his hands and starts thanking him. The crown prince is annoyed, but decides not to resist. He realizes that nothing can be changed now. Jubalion, meanwhile, wonders why she hadn't thought of this sooner. After all, she can ask Geraldine to be her partner. The brunette is in shock. He clearly thought she was talking about him.